Thank you for joining us for the Orange County Arts Council's virtual studio visit. This program is made possible by donations from people like you. 50% of donations go directly to the artists featured, and 50% to Orange County Arts Council programs. Please consider donating today. You can donate by going to ocartscouncil.org. The Arts Council's virtual studio visits are presented in partnership with the Newburgh Free Library and are made possible in part by NYSCA, the New York State Council on the Arts.
Today we visit the studio of Michael Piotrowski. Michael Piotrowski is a painter, printmaker, residing in Middletown, New York, with a studio in Goshen, New York. For 40 plus years, he was a lighting and set designer with dance companies across the U.S. He taught at Brooklyn College, SUNY New Paltz, and guest lectured at Vassar College. His paintings, woodblock prints, and monoprints have been included in group, solo, and multiple invitational exhibits. His work ranges from 5x7 national print exchanges to 4-foot square steamroller prints at Munson Williams Proctor Art Institute in Utica, New York. He was a finalist for a National Park Residency at Chaco Canyon, New Mexico.
Okay, so the first question is, who is this guy? And how did he get on this tour? Word got out that I had taken on a larger studio. Was in the process of selling my house, and but I had painted in high school. I had painted in college. And once I graduated, it was, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough space, and blah, blah, blah. And eventually, in that time period, I was working with dance companies as a lighting designer, as talked about earlier. But when I turned 60, I was back living up in the Hudson Valley again. I moved out of Brooklyn. And someone said to me, if not now, when? And I was lucky enough to meet William Noonan, one of the instructors at Wallkill River School. And I studied with him for a number of years and did a lot of plein air painting. So what's on the screen now is I painted in high school. That's one of my high school paintings. And go to the next one, Sarah.
Got it.
And I did in college, doing landscapes at a time when everybody else was doing much wilder things in the late 60s. And this is my porch studio at my home, my previous home in Middletown. And you can see that there was a lot of plein air work going on. This was my work room. In my house, I had various spaces set up. This was my work room and what was an extra bedroom. And my print studio was in the basement. You can see the laundry room. And eventually, after I sold my house, I realized I moved from a 3-story house to a 2-bedroom apartment. So I was looking for a studio and I found this space. And this is what it looked like when I first found it. And I think this is the point where we go into the pre-recorded video.
So, if all went well on the first part, you've seen photos of the original studio spaces at my house and photos of the empty room that has become the new studio. This sign on the stairs used to be in the lawn whenever there was an open studio tour between 2009 and 2016 or 17 at my house with Orange County Arts Council. We are now entering the new studio, and you will notice it is no longer empty. So here we are looking at the display wall where finished pieces that are framed are on display and ready for any local group shows or sales that may occur. The hanging system is lattice work that was what's the word? I forgot the word. But anyway, it's hung here, and it used to be hung in my porch studio. And while we're looking at some of the artwork, I just want to explain that sometimes, actually a lot of times, landscapes show up in my work even when it's abstract. I was a plein air painter for a number of years, and this is, pretty much a literal landscape in a print, as is this one up here. And then when we move across, these are a little more abstract. These are more atmospheric, this series. And then we go more abstract again. And then we come to this piece, which is abstract, but what I'm referring to is like the rolling hills kind of imagery where the glares are from the lighting. Anyway, sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it just shows up after the fact. I recognize it later. Below, we have storage shelves, and at some point when I was moving in here, I had an aha that I did not have to assemble them full height. So these are half height. And that gave me storage below, a counter space on top, and also did not block any of the wall space, so the display area is clear. And so now I want to show you the central table, work table that I built, I designed. Again, on the ends, I purchased 2 foot by 4 foot industrial shelving and built them half high. And they became the ends of this 4 foot by 8 foot table. They also became like the ends as a supports. They left an opening. They bridged an area, and it's kind of like a parking garage for portfolios and larger boxes, like this box with stretcher frames in it. Moving around to the other side end of the table, a friend of mine told me about strawberry trays used to protect the packaging when they're being shipped, and they're heavyweight cardboard, and they're shallow boxes that become flat files. And stacking them in the shelf space, they're basically drawers for different supplies. As we're going around the table, you may have noticed that I put floor padding, and it runs all around the table. That too is repurposed, that's the word I couldn't think of, repurposed from the porch. The porch was a slab, and in the cooler weather it was like 40 degrees at your ankles, so I got the padding. And now it's running around this work table. So you can see there's storage bins in the side shelves. There's another set of shelves here with printing tools and a second-hand cabinet with a drawer. And this is basically where I stand when I'm making a print. And on the table is where I have the inks laid out, and I ink up the plate, and then I can just turn in place. And here is the press. And above the press is an additional 8 feet of bulletin board that I installed so that I have a place to hang works in progress. Continuing, there's a small table here. Artists can always find ways of filling up a horizontal surface. And in the corner, we can see the cold water sink and wet area on the countertop. This is where I will dampen the paper in this tray and blot it in towels in preparation for using the dampened paper on the inked blocks, whatever form the block may take, a wood block or monoprint. And this is the shelf where I store inks and inking supplies. Moving along, there's also a shelf for glues and paints and other spray paint, things of that nature. With more countertop, this dry area of countertop, and a small area here as we come to the corner where there's a small desk area. Now below these counters, there's also more storage for power tools, rolling carts where I can keep paper files, and on this side there are three, oh, the chair's in the way, three, again, rolling cases that are drawers for smaller art supplies. Going back to the desk, we can see that there's more countertop. There's a place for cutting paper. I'm currently working on carving a small block there with the brushes. And there's another 12 feet of bulletin board where I can hang dry pieces and figure out what's next. This series of circles, these were done in woodstock. Here's a series of 3 frames that I'm waiting for them to tell me what they want me to do with them. Not exactly sure yet. They're very old. I've been carrying them around for 18 years. And we come back to the door to the room. So that's the general layout of the studio. And now we'll go back to Sarah and the live element of the show.
So that's the space, and now I want to talk about my process. As I said, I was a plein air painter for quite a while, and I was given an opportunity in 2014 to participate in a workshop at Garrison Art Center, where basically I was bitten by the printmaking bug. And so I work on a lot of different projects, and they evolve over time. This particular project at Garrison, we were asked to bring in an image that we had already worked on and developed, or to start a new image. But seeing it was only 2 weeks, I figured I'll bring in an image. This is a digital copy of a painting that I used. And these are some of the prints that came out of this process. I learned along the way that I do not particularly, I'm not attracted to making additions in the traditional sense of 10, 15, 20, exactly the same. And I did not know this when I was doing this, but because I'm basically a painter originally, I'm a painter printmaker, where you can see that sections are inked in different colors and then printed. So I'm not evenly inking the whole surface. These are wood blocks, and they're carved with special tools. The largest one is maybe 1/4 of an inch. Now, I consider myself to be a Renaissance person. I'm attracted to a lot of different things. I'm also a raven. The next shiny object will grab me. And I decided, someplace along the way, I had another print. Hang on a second. the print was not strong enough to stand on its own. And I decided to do something different. And I created this shadow box with multiple versions of that image and multiple scales. So next to my bed, I have this little notebook. And in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever, when I wake up and I have a little idea, I write it down. Because usually by the time I wake up, it's gone. So that's woodblock. These were made, these are monoprints, and they're done on a piece of flexible plastic, the size of the image. And the ink is applied in my case, in a painterly fashion. There was no image in mind, and this is a monotype. I took that under the advisement of one of my teachers. These are 4 of the really great, what are they called? Master printmakers that I have gotten to work with at Woodstock. This woman right here, Lisa Mackey, more about her later, but I met her at Garrison and she invited me to Woodstock. This print is actually a ghost print of this image. Once you run a print through the press, there's usually residual ink, whether it's on the plexiglass plate or the woodblock, and you can get a second print off of it. And what I did was I inked the whole print with what's called transparency, and that helped to pull some of the residual ink up. So it's the same plate, 20 minutes apart, 2 totally different prints. And this is what excites me about printmaking. When I was a painter, primarily a painter, I've got this brush in my hand and I'm noodling away in a corner, and I gave my instructor permission to slap my hand every 5 minutes because he kept saying, you have to work the whole piece. So next we have another recurring image is triptych. This was done originally, that's a digital copy. Those are originally 12-inch square. I worked at Center for Creative Printmaking, Center for Contemporary Printmaking in Norwalk, Connecticut. And with a wonderful instructor, again, another master printmaker, Francine Fortite. And we did a lot of work in 4 days. I came away with, I don't know, 20 or 30 prints. Coming to your right, Gloria, this was the first time that I was invited to Woodstock for the Monothon. And I got to work with Tony Kirk, another master printmaker. And each of these people offers a career of information, and it's in the little details that you really get the nuggets. So this again is a triptych. This process is called a viscosity print. The yellows and the ochres were inked onto 3 plates. I had a drawing underneath the plates. And then I manipulated, drew into every place you see a blue line I drew with something to take away the ink and to manipulate the ink. And then before we even put it through the press, a different thickness of ink was used, the blue, and rolled over. And every place there was a raw part of the plate without any ink on it, the blue adhered to the plate. So this was only printed once through the press, yet it has all these different, and down here, maybe you can see some of the white paper. I'm not sure if that'll pick up. So triptychs, but my scale keeps changing down. And these, again, we're done with Francine. This is Francine at Center for Contemporary Printmaking in Norwalk. She was a guest instructor there. And these were done with her. She works on a very large scale. She works on paper that's 20 feet long, and creates these amazing sculpture prints. So she had demonstrated working on a larger piece of paper, and I was the first one in any of her classes to jump in and try it. And because this paper is wider than the bed of the press, the paper was folded. Let me just one last thing. At this time, I was starting to talk about moving to Southwest. So she said, well, you're here in the Hudson Valley palette, and now you've moved to your Southwest palette. So these images were made with this block, repositioned, re-inked, and sent through the press another time. So in order to do this particular print, sometimes it was half. This is where this would be folded under and the block would be run through so I could get this half section. Where was I going with this? And the other piece of this, there are sections where masks were put down, and these masks would block the ink from being printed. So if you have, this is ink and this is white paper, and you put this down, this will be white when you take it off. It's here. So there are different ways of manipulating the same block and getting multiple imagery from it. I'm going to put this back down.
Sure.
Can we go to this one? I'm making Gloria wander around the studio. Thank you so much for doing this, Gloria. This image is from this block. Again, it's a piece of plywood, hand carved. Everything was hand carved out of this. This was printed on 2 different pieces of paper, and this is actually a collage.
Try the light and see what happens.
The whitish paper here is cut out. It's the same image printed on 2 different pieces of paper, and then I just used the lighter section for what maybe snow in this image. Again, I do not make editions. So I make series. So this one is the same block, but underneath it, there is a monoprint. Again, don't move.
I won't.
The background color was inked onto a full-size piece of this plastic. And that was printed first. There's a second one down here. You can see that the colors are very different. And then I inked this in, it's a blue black, and printed that on top of the color. So I get a lot of variety in the work. There were 9 different images, different prints in this series, and the others are no longer in my possession. So if you could just come down here for a moment. These two are in the same vein, where there is a wood block that's cut, all the dark areas, and then the background was printed first with the color, and the block was printed on top.
Those
This
are
one-
beautiful. Where did that image come from?
Which one? This one?
Yes, the one we're looking at right now.
I'm standing in the parking lot at Garrison train station looking across the tracks.
I see.
And that's the Hudson River, and that's the across the river there. So these are the rail tracks on the east side of the river, Hudson, west side of the river. And
Gorgeous.
I don't know if it's showing up, but you can see the striations here in the print. I don't know if
We're getting a lot of glare from that light behind us.
I bought what I thought was the wrong plywood, but it actually worked for me because the grain in the plywood with these horizontal streaks looked like either wind, or someone mentioned to me at the Goshen Art Walk, it feels like I'm inside the train with the scratched windows looking out and seeing the other tracks. So it worked. That's another thing about printmaking. I have to go with what the material, where the materials are taking me. I'm not in control all the time, which is a good thing for me. Next, 1979.
What image do you want first?
I'm gonna do these first.
Okay.
I'll hold them up. I was taking some graduate courses in photography, and I came across, well, actually, let's start here.
Okay.
This is a triptych. This was back in the 30s and 40s. They had picnic grounds that were basically shells with a roof, and they would have dances, and they would have a kitchen. And this one in particular was about 3 blocks from my mom's house where I was growing up in the 50s. And one weekend there would be a German picnic with all the music and the food. And the next weekend it'd be an Italian picnic. And so in the 70s, late 70s, it was derelict. And that's where I found this piano that was covered with leaves. And so I found the old negatives when I was cleaning out the house, getting ready to move. And I started working with this image of the piano. Let's go here. This is a small wood block. This is called a reduction print. It was made popular in the late 50s, early 60s by Picasso. In this print, if you want something white, that's the first thing you carve out. And then you make, if you want an addition of 10, you print 15. Because someplace along the way, you may damage a print, may not register properly or something. And you want to hopefully end up with 10. So then the next image you cut out is the gray. And so you print the whole thing gray. And then the last, you print whatever you want left gray, you carve away and you print black. I mean, you can do this 6, 7, 8 times. Okay. Then, because I am always open to expanding and developing an image, when I got invited to participate in the big old steamrolling print event up in Utica, I transferred this image.
Hang on, going too fast for
I'm
me.
sorry.
That's okay.
To the steamroller print. Now we're given half a sheet of plywood and a little over a month to carve.
Put your hand up for scale.
And so this is I think it's 40 by 48 once I stretched it and put it on the wall. And coming down, this is what the block looks like. And Sarah has a video of the whole process of the steamroller event that she can put into a link into the chat.
We must have been reading your mind because we just posted it in the chat right before you said it. So well done. Good timing. That is another gorgeous piece. And it seems like when you're inking these, you're using a lot of ink. Is that true? How much ink? I know ink is also very expensive, but
the event up in Utica it's at the Munson Williams Proctor Art Institute, which also has Pratt upstate. They have freshman and sophomore year Pratt upstate affiliated with the museum, and it's combined that sponsorship, and they get a donation of a giant bucket of black ink. Now, I learned just last Saturday that ink is referred to as steamroller ink. And the companies that make the ink, black ink, there's Bone Black, there's Mars Black, there's like 5 different shades of black, and some of them are bluish and some of them are reddish. And when they're making a batch of ink, what's left in the bucket after they fill up their containers to sell, they put into they save it, and they save all the blacks and mix them together, and that becomes the ink that they donate for these steamroller projects.
Oh, interesting. So, Michael, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, well, let me just say that Gloria is scanning the block from this year. I just was up there at the end of July, and this is the block that was printed this year. The print is still rolled up. I haven't framed it yet. Question?
I hear you talking about the process, which is one of my favorite parts of printmaking. The process is so amazing. What is your favorite part of the entire process?
The excitement that happens when I peel the print up after it goes through the press.
The reveal. Thank you.
I have, in a moment, I will go to something that will explain that even more. On the table, I laid out a few of the works in progress. During COVID, I took a couple of workshops on book binding for artists. And this is what my process looks like. I put together a ring binder. I have all different ideas. The actual size of this book, hey there, come to you, will be this high. And this is the size of the pages, so they're vertical pages. And the imagery on this particular book is primarily pine trees, and the idea for the book is called Grandfather Trees, and they're witnesses. There will be some words in the course of the book, and it will be something like this. This is a sample that I just roughly put together. I'm gonna go behind you. And then back over here, the second book that I'm working on, I was just up in Lake Huron for a week. You can come to this side if you want. And again, there's another ring binder of ideas and pages. There are lots of photographs that I'm referencing. And it will look something like this. This is a very rough beginning that I'm going to take, say, this sunset picture. And this is called a collage plate. It's collage like collage.
Put a little more under the light.
For those who are not familiar with collagraphs, could you explain what a collagraph is? Very exciting.
Well, this is a piece of cardboard, which I've sealed with, in this case, just white glue. This front edge, I've got the sky, the water, the sand. This front edge is actually torn paper, and it has a carborundum on it, which is a liquid sandpaper. And one of the things that's going to happen in this book is that the horizon line is going to be consistent through every single page. So I didn't know which paper to use to create this color. And I tried 3 different papers, and this last one is closest to it, but I lost the brightness. And so I have to work on this. And there is a process called sheen collé where I can attach a lighter piece of paper and glue it in place in the press. So this is just at the very, very beginning stages in terms of actually printing, but it's pretty advanced in terms of imagery that I'm going to be using. So there's a lot of research that's gone into this. And the last thing I want to show is today. Because this morning, Lisa, who I mentioned earlier, Lisa Mackey, the master printmaker, is offering a class today and tomorrow up in Woodstock. And my exhibition partner, David Munford, said, "You have to take this." And I said, "Yes, I know, I have to take this." So this is my kit that I carry to Woodstock or Garrison. Again, another notebook. The imagery that I ended up using today was from this notebook. And Mary Lynn, if you're listening, it's the notebook you made. These images I drew from the airplane between Dallas and Santa Fe. And in that area, it's very arid and dry. And these circles are all the irrigation circles that you can see from the plane. And now today, you can also see a lot of wind turbines out there too. So it's a very interesting landscape. And this was an image that I had sketched out that I wanted to work with that also fell into that notebook. And this is what I worked with today. So this may not look like much, but this is the plate that I printed. Step back, I'm going to be digging in here. This is the plate that I printed from. And some of it, it's all water-based inks in this process that she's working with today with Lisa. And this is a scrap of paper from a print that I cut down, and I used this for, here we go. The sheen collé. This is, sections of this were ripped up. You can see this red edge here and the diagonal edge here. There is a second piece of this paper glued in place in the process of printing. And peeling this off the press this morning, just peeling it up. Lisa and I were just very excited about what came out. This was after about, she had an hour or so demonstration, and this was probably 25 minutes worth of work. And because I was running out the door to come here. So, I don't know, let me see where we are on time.
Sarah will tell us.
It is about 5:45. So we have about 15 minutes left. So Michael, let us know when you want to open up the section for questions and answers.
Right now.
Oh, well, that works out. Good timing. Thank you. So for those of you attending, please type your questions in the chat and I will read them to Michael as they come in. But I guess, Michael, I wanted to ask you, and this is a tough question that may not have an answer, but which piece of work today are you most proud of?
Well, I'm excited about the new piece that I did, because I'm always excited about the pulling a print off the press. I enjoy the steamroller event immensely because there are 25 artists involved. So there are 25 images that are that size. And the 25 of us show up and we're the crew, we're the team for the day. Some people are, you asked about inking. Some people are dirty jobs, they're inking the blocks. And in that video that's in the chat, it shows the whole process. But that whole sense of working in a community is really exciting. And there's other times when all I want to do is be alone in the studio. So
right. And I'm sure you've had plenty of that over the past year and a half.
Well,
all of us.
A lot of the time, since I only rented this space as of October.
I
so
see.
All this has happened since October. And thankfully I had a dear friend who helped with the heavy lifting. Seeing we're on the second floor.
Wow.
And building this table.
Michael, you are a prolific artist. There is so much high quality work. How do you manage your time? Do you have a certain schedule that you stick to in order to create all of this work?
I'm very undisciplined.
I wouldn't believe it.
In terms of my time, the studio is 20 minutes away from where I live. And there are some days where I don't wanna, you know, I just can't do it. And then when I'm here, this was a pottery studio for 30 years before I took it over. And the energy in this room, Gloria can tell you how comfortable it is, except for the temperature right now, because we've got the air conditioner off because
right.
too much. But energy wise, it's a very, very comfortable place to work. And as you can see from the pre-recorded section, I really planned this thing out and made it very functional. And I'm still getting used to it.
So there's a bunch of comments coming in through the chat, including, you know, Michael, your work looks terrific and fabulous job of organizing your workshop, from Anna Hersher and others who are just sharing their enthusiasm with viewing your work, which is lovely. So thank you so much, those in the audience who are making comments. But I was wondering, before we run out of time, could you share with us your greatest artistic inspiration? Well,
I had just gone to Lake Huron for a week. And can you just turn around for a moment? I don't know if you can zoom in on this.
Sure.
This is a portrait I did of a very, very dear friend of mine. And We were soulmates for 54 years. And she passed away in June, just before I went to Michigan. Okay. And so because I was not visiting her this year in Michigan, I had this time set aside. And the road trip, I drove 2,075.2 miles round trip. I passed through Rochester, Cleveland, Toledo, and Detroit. And I had played all these places with dance companies, but I never had time to visit their local museums. So I did this artist journey, and I went to all these places, and I was just filled with all the work that was new to me, and some that was familiar to me. And on the last day coming through Rochester, on my way back to Utica to do the Steamroller event, I was in the Memorial Art Gallery, and I thought, well, maybe I don't have enough time to go to the George Eastman house for the photography. And I called them the Time Stretcher Angels, made enough time for me to go to the George Eastman house. And the exhibit that I saw there of the photography was the most powerful exhibit that I had seen of all the exhibits along this journey. And it was a woman who was in the late 70s, the same time I was working in photography. I was in New Paltz and she was in Illinois, and we were on very parallel journeys. And so much of the work just resonated with me. And she's also a book maker.
Wow.
So I was filled with a lot of inspiration from this trip. Other than that, there are certain printmakers that I have discovered over time that different moments I'll be excited and, you know, look at different work.
And which artists have influenced you the most, either historically or contemporary artists? I know you mentioned some master printmakers that you work with, but are there any artists in history whose work has inspired you?
Definitely Helen Frankenthaler, both her paintings and her prints. At one point, when I go to New Mexico, I have to change planes in Dallas-Fort Worth. So I usually spend a couple days there with people that I knew from the ballet company from years ago when I worked there. And one of them is working at the Amon Carter Museum. And I went there, and there was this gorgeous exhibit of Helen Frankenthaler's prints. And the next stop on that exhibit was Vassar College. So I got to see it twice.
Oh my goodness. And as far as all the different tools that you reviewed in the video, which tool could you not live without? What is the one thing that you have to have in your studio? He's gonna grab it for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna guess it is a carving tool.
Mm-hmm.
These
Was I right?
I had props set up around the room and I forgot to use them. This is the primary tool. It's a 1/4 inch.
Put it against your shirt so we can, yeah. Turn it around, good.
This is a rounded, half round, including most of the cutting on those large wood blocks for the steamroller is done with this. There are also finer tools. Sorry, I need my piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also one last one I'll show.
Mm-hmm.
This one is a pointed, a V shape, so you can do finer lines.
I can certainly tell that you have used these tools for many hours. They seem to be an extension of your arm rather than a separate tool. That is wonderful. And we have a few minutes left here. And I guess, is there anything that you find is most important to share with people listening today?
Well, find something that you really enjoy. Find something that, you know, when I was painting, it was like I would do one thing, and that was the painting that was finished. With this, I'm able to go into variety, and I find that very exciting. And also, it gives me both the opportunity to play with color. This is all connected with my dance lighting also.
And these are the questions in the chat. Ask about, did dance inspire you, and did your career in lighting inspire you?
Well, in dance, I have an empty stage primarily. It's very rare you have scenery in dance. And you have dancers in costume on stage, and music. And it's my job to create the time of day, the atmosphere, the location, only with light. So I have observed light a lot, and color a lot, and time of day a lot, and clouds. And when I was teaching lighting design at New Paltz, I did my best to open up the eyes of the students into observing and taking notes. I would have them write on what the light looked like in a room at different times of day, and what the source was, what direction it was coming from, what color was it. And a lot of them were surprised to find out how much they could see. So
that is amazing. So you certainly seem to walk through the world with your eyes wide open, which I think is such an important thing for artists. And I have a question here from Sarah Pearson, and it's a good one. But what do you do when you are stuck?
Well, sometimes the mind chatter can be quite intense. And a dear friend just coaches me and cheerleads me on by saying that when you're stuck, it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's a time when things are percolating. You may have something going on way in the back of your head that you're sort of only semi-aware of. And then you'll be working one day and something will just pop and it'll just make sense. And otherwise, I binge watch a lot of PBS mysteries and things of that nature. And sometimes there's an image on the screen that I actually stand up and take another picture of trees. Trees are very, very prevalent in my work.
Oh, fascinating. So I noticed that your work, the most recent items that you were showing us, seem to be moving in a three-dimensional direction with the accordion books. And then there was a collograph that you had shown us as well. What is the next phase of your work going to look like, do you think?
Well, the grandfather tree book, I started working on that a year ago, January, and I was up to full steam and just getting to work, and then everything shut down. And so I've just taken that back out of the bin from underneath the portfolios there. And 2 weeks ago, I started working with Kate McLaughlin up in the Woodstock School of Art print studio. She's a master printmaker there, and she's offered a 4-week session, and you bring in a project and I'll mentor you through it. And so it's not going in just to take a class to do a specific outcome. You're coming in with your project and getting one-on-one support. So that book and the lake book are two things that I want to work on right away.
Michael, thank you so much for letting us see your studio and talking us through your process. And Gloria Bonelli, who is the camera woman this evening, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening.
Thank you so much for letting me be one of the studios on your tour. And I'm very, very grateful to Gloria. She's been a great cheerleader for many years for me and my work.
Thank you, Michael. Beautiful work.